Good morning, Russia!
Good morning, Rasha. Today we're going to be talking to the prestigious judge, Mr. Ilyich. He's going to be talking about his illness and his life. So please put your hands together and help me in welcoming Mr. Ilyich.
Bonjour.
Welcome. So, talking about your life as a judge, what was the most impactful part of your life?
It was actually my childhood because I realized that when I went to school and began to focus on status, it was that my life was no longer the real thing. My childhood was really the only time where I focused on the people and not about what I looked like to other people. And because of this, I look back and I regret that I changed my life and became so focused on status.
And what kind of a legacy do you hope to leave behind?
Well, I believe that I'm going to leave behind a legacy of justice because as a judge, I made the difficult decisions that needed to be made, and they may not have always been what people wanted, but I did what I needed to do. Unfortunately, I do regret the fact that I think I left behind a legacy of sadness to my family. I realized that I didn't spend enough time with my son, and I think he's not going to remember me very much because I was never there for him.
Oh, and talking about your regrets, if you were to recover and change your life, what would you change?
I would spend more time with my family, and I would worry less about status and trying to look good to other people. Being a judge, I always felt like I had to build my name up in society and I had to have the best parties and know the best people, but I realized that none of that truly mattered. I worried so much about money and other stuff and trying to make my house look nice. I remember one time I got so obsessed with decorating my house because it just had to look perfect for everybody. And I realized that none of the relationships in my life were even real. Everything was so superficial. In fact, my wife and I, if I'm being completely honest, because I have nothing to lose knowing that I'm going to die soon, my wife and I never truly loved her. We were just together because I thought that's what society wanted of me.
And coming back to the real topic of today's conversation, what was it like to know that you were dying?
It was really frightening. At first, I was in denial because I just thought, I'm somebody who's high status, high class. How can this happen to me? And whenever I went to those many doctors and they told me that there was this issue, I just thought, well, they all have to be wrong. But then after a while, I started to accept it, and I felt so much anger inside of me. It's like, I was like, why me? Out of all the people in the world that this could happen to, why is it that it's me? And I also felt angry because I began to look back, and like I said before, I realized that I didn't focus on what was important. So it made me angry that I wouldn't have any more time. I was spending so much time ignoring my family, and now that's something that I'm going to have to live with. And I'm hoping that at some point I can reach the bliss that is accepting death, because I will never be happy in my last days if I can't realize that death is inevitable and give in to it.
And I guess you got like an advance notice on your death. Do you think that clarity comes with hindsight?
Yes, I believe so. I feel like whenever you're looking back, you can see things so much more clearly because whenever you're in the moment, you're so caught up in what's going on that you don't focus so much on like the people around you and what you should have been doing. But when you look back, you're not caught up in those emotions. So like if something upset you in the past, you can look back at it and say, I'm no longer upset by that. I've gotten over it. And that helps you to really see what was really happening there.
And how did facing your death allow you to see your life as it was?
It kind of helped me to see that the people in my life, I had superficial relationships with them. I didn't spend any time with my son, and I saw how sad my son was, and I realized that maybe he was sad because I never spent any time with him. It also helped me to see that the people that I was spending time with felt the same way as me. Like my wife, she's never faced death, so she hasn't had these revelations yet, but my wife, whenever she was trying to go to the opera, all she cared about was getting there and looking good. She came to see me, and I could just tell I was a burden to her, and she was mad that she had to talk to me before going to the opera. And it was just really awful to see that for her, she was in a hurry, and I wasn't the person that mattered to her.
And talking about your family, what lessons do you hope that your family will learn from your death?
I really hope that they will learn to appreciate the time with family, and they will realize that the fact that I avoided family was something that you shouldn't do. I always thought that it was simply not possible that I should die, but I hope that they'll start to accept death, unlike me, and realize that it's a part of life and not fight it so much. For a long time, I referred to death as it because it's really hard for me to face that word death because it seems so large and so inevitable. And so I felt like my social status would be sort of an escape from this fate. But now I realize that it doesn't matter whether you're high class or low class, you can still die. And I hope that my family realizes that too, because they use their high class as almost a shield against everything. They don't feel things, they try to think of dead people as burdens and not think about what it means. And so I hope that they will realize that there are some things in life you have to face and that you need to move past those really hard things in life and learn to accept your own mortality.
Okay. And do you think they'll move past pleasing society?
Honestly, I'm not sure. I know that if I had never gone through this near-death experience and this illness, I would never have felt this way. I believe that my wife may feel this way if she gets a bad illness, but otherwise, I don't think she'll ever see it because she's so caught up in looking good at everybody else. I think my children, they have a chance at changing because they're still young. Especially my son, he's very untainted by society and everything, so maybe he'll look at things in a different light.
And coming back to your illness, how did the pain of your illness affect your ability to accept your own death?
It made it really hard to accept death because I kept just fighting against the pain, and I found that it was all that I could focus on. And eventually, I am hoping that I'll reach a point where I realize that pain is inevitable and that I can't avoid it. And people will ask me, well, was it worse to suffer physically or worse to suffer mentally? And I believe that the mental suffering is so much greater because you can always take some sort of medicine that will help ease your physical suffering, but mental suffering doesn't leave you. Like, for such a long time, I felt like I was descending into this darkness, into this death, and I just couldn't get past that. And during this time, I wondered why this would happen to me. I thought, I'm a powerful person, I'm a judge. How is it that death is even more powerful than I am?
Okay, thank you so much for sitting with us today and answering our questions. Next week, we're going to be talking to Gerazim, a person who has been very closely working with Mr. Ilyich. Thank you very much. Good morning, Rasha. Last week, we talked to Mr. Ilyich, and sadly, he passed away a few days ago. But today, we are talking to someone very close to him, Gerazim. It's nice to meet you. And now we are going to be doing a speed round. So, why were you so nice and patient with Mr. Ilyich?
I was so nice and patient with him because I believe that everyone will end up dying someday and that they should be treated well. And I would want to be comforted the way I comforted Mr. Ilyich as well.
And what influenced you to hope dying?
Nothing really influenced me except the fact that I grew up in a poor family and was basically surrounded by death most of the time, and I saw how hard it was for someone to face death alone. And it doesn't really matter if someone's materialistic or not. It just matters that everyone's human and that they all deserve to be comforted.
How did you feel once you knew that Mr. Ilyich was dying?
I accepted the fact that he was dying, and I didn't want him to worry or anything, and I wanted him to be relaxed. And I didn't really have a problem with his suffering. I wanted him to feel comfortable, and I didn't really understand why I shouldn't help him. And I wanted his last days to be less painful and happy instead.
And how do you accept death as a part of life?
I accept death as a part of life by seeing death as unavoidable and as a part of the everyday, the life cycle.
And how does life relate to death, and what benefit do the living get in interacting with the dying?
Well, life eventually leads to death, and death leads to new life, and that's how they're related. And as we die, there is new life, and we have to face death while we are living anyway with our family members. And death is a natural part of our life, and by helping the dying, people are reminded by their own mortality, and I hope that there will be someone who helps me in my last days of life as well.
Thank you. Wait. Oh, we have a question from the audience, I see. How do you pronounce your name and what does it mean?
You pronounce my name as Gyrosine.
Oh, I'm so sorry I've been pronouncing it wrong.
It's okay. And it means respectable.
Oh, that's really nice. Well,
Thank
it was
you.
really nice meeting you.
Me too.
And we'll see you next week with the new person to interview.